When my client with the cutest style hired me to do another dresser, I decided to do a her style versus my style. So I found two similar dressers. They're both made out of particle board and they both have a similar design look, but we are going to make them completely transform and in two completely different directions. So here's the agenda for today. I'm going to show you the prep work, which I did both at the same time. Then I'll show you the design work for mine, then the design work for hers, and then I will show you them before and after all together. It's gonna be so much fun. Let's start with the prep work. Prep work is so important. You want to make sure that you have your piece completely prepped for paint. You can't just put paint on any piece. So there are some really important things to remember. First, you want to always start off by removing hardware and getting a deep clean. Make sure to remove your hardware first because you don't want to leave any gunk on the piece and then sand that into your surface. You want to make sure to have a clean slate for the smoothest finish. I always clean using Simple Green Cleaner. It's a degreaser and all-purpose cleaner, so it's the most effective for the type of pieces that I work on. I'm going to have all of the links for the direct products that I use for these flips in the caption. So if you have any questions about what I use, definitely check that out. I then move on to fixing any repairs needed. Bondo is my best friend. I use this to cover up old drill holes. I use it for water damage, for repairs, missing pieces of the particle board. So what you do is you mix the Bondo goop with the hardening goop, and then honestly, after you apply it, it'll take about 3 minutes to dry, and it does wonders. I have noticed for the smoothest finish for hardware holes, I need to go over it 2 times with Bondo to get the smoothest finish. And honestly, after the second time, you won't even be able to tell that the old holes even existed. So when the Bondo completely dries after a couple of minutes, what you want to do is you want to sand it down with 120 or 80 grit and sand it to a flat, smooth surface. Honestly, working on 2 pieces at a time for me is the most efficient because I work on these pieces back to back, and when the different steps line up, it's so efficient to sand one piece and then hop on to the next. So once I finished completely sanding down my piece, I went on to hers, and hers are the ones that I needed to fill in those hardware holes. So again, I sanded down the first level of Bondo, and then I reapplied one more time because again, that's where I get the smoothest finish, and then I sanded that down flat after that, and I couldn't even tell that the holes ever existed, even after paint, after primer. It makes a huge difference. In about 3 minutes, we covered the before shots, the removing hardware, cleaning, Bondo repairs, and scuff sanding, and I would love to say that I'm done with prep work, but then I completely forgot that mine actually had this really weird trim on it. It was weird. It was rubber and it just wasn't gonna last long, so I had to remove that completely around the whole piece, and then I decided to add edge banding. I have been so intimidated by edge banding and I don't know why. It was so easy to apply and I'm really happy with the results. So what I did is I got a roll of edge banding and I cut it to size for the slots that I needed. And then because it already has pre-dried glue on before, all you need to do is heat it up with an iron on its place and it'll glue solid to the piece that you have. Honestly, again, it was so much easier to apply than I remembered, and so I was really happy with how simple it was, and it gives it a whole new finish, and so I highly recommend it. Once it is completely secured to the piece, you then want to take a razor blade or an X-Acto knife and cut off any overflow so that you have a flushed finish on those sides. One of the nice parts that I prefer if you are working against veneer, it is so nice because then you can really use the razor blade and get close to all the details to make sure that you really have a smooth outcome, and you can go over it as many times as you need to make sure you get any errors. I then repeated this whole process across the entire frame of the piece. I decided to go a different route with the drawers, so I'll explain that in a little bit. But for the frame, I'm really happy with how the outcome was because when I saw the original trim, I was so frustrated and kind of stuck with what to do. And so with this new edge banding, it gives it all a really nice finish, and it still keeps that wood texture. I used a razor blade to get a nice crisp edge on the very corner of the pieces again, and then I smoothed it all down with 320 grit around all of the edges. For the drawers, I used a different technique because I ran out of edge banding. I used Bondo. Again, Bondo is my best friend for this piece. And so because the old trim was inlaid, I had to make sure to fill in all of those gaps before moving on and putting any paint or primer over it. I then sanded all of those drawer edges smooth and made sure that it was a completely fresh start for where the trim originally was. I then primed both of the pieces using Kilz primer. I found that the 2-gallon container is the most affordable in my opinion, and the primer is still phenomenal, so I'm really happy with how it goes on every single time that I use my sprayers. I've only had to do 1 coat of primer for these, but then I always make sure to scuff sand using 320 grit after the primer. And now this is where we break off into my piece first to go over design work, and then we're going to break off to her piece next. My piece I am selling on Facebook Marketplace or OfferUp, so I wanted to go with a really sleek and modern color that is really easy to style with. That way I have a larger market of people that would be interested in this piece. So I made sure to do 3 coats of the black paint, and I always lightly sand with 320 grit between coats to get the smoothest finish. So once I apply a coat, I lightly sand with 320, and lightly sanding is literally in 2 directions 2 times over, and that's how I got this beautiful finish. For the design on the front of the drawers, I wanted to go with something natural but still really beautiful, and so I decided to add 2 bamboo slats down the sides of the drawers. It still looks intentional. It's a beautiful design decision in my opinion, and it gives it this added flair and texture to the drawers that don't make it so bland. So how I secured these on was I added a really thin layer of wood glue to the back of each bamboo slot after cutting them all out and lining them all up, and then I went in with my pin nailer to secure them all down. Once that was all done, I went on to drawer liners. I learned the coolest trick for drawer liners from a friend, and what that is to get the perfect size for your drawers. You lay down 4 printer pieces of paper and you just lay them down in the drawers, and then that'll give you the right measurement, so you tape that down for your outline. And this just saves me so much time. So I add a little piece of tape in the middle for a little handle to pull up on, and then I have my outline. Once the outline is done, I lay it down on the wallpaper, and then I trace it with a marker or pen, whatever, and it saves me so much time because then I can directly cut it from the trace marks. And I'm just the type of person who always overthinks and stresses out about measuring. So this is my go-to for drawer liners. And then I simply lay the drawer liners in the drawers once removing the backing. And I am so happy with how incredible this hack has helped me with drawer liners. And I don't mind them so much anymore, which is awesome. That's progress, guys. Now, I would show you me laying the drawer liners into the drawers, but my dum-dum self used my driver's license to flatten it down, so all of that footage is bad. So I just installed the hardware, and then I moved on to the last design piece. I decided to add legs to my piece to add some height, and I did it to hers as well. Thankfully, the base underneath was solid wood, so I just secured those on with screws. I pre-drilled with a really thin drill bit, and so once I pre-drilled in, it was really simple to add screws on, and I added 4 to each leg, which really helped secure it and give it a really sturdy base. That's everything for my piece. I'm really excited to show you guys the finale, but let's move on to her style now. As for my client, she has the most beautiful style, and so she wanted something that really popped and showed her personality through it, and so that's why she picked this beautiful, bold, bright pink and magenta paint. And I first was hesitant. For a very short second, I was like, oh, that's very bright. But then as soon as I painted it on the piece and I saw the hardware that it was matched with, I fell in love. So I did the same exact steps. I painted it 3 coats and I lightly sanded with 320 grit in between each coat to get the smoothest finish. And something happened with my sprayer when it popped open. It spilled, so it looked like I murdered Barbie in my paint section. So that was hilarious to me. So now it's permanently pink in my garage. But anyways, I then did drawer liners, and I should have listened to my own advice and did the whole measuring trick. I tried the technique where people measure it out and they do a little extra and then they just cut it off with a razor blade, and that stressed me out. Honestly, it took so much more time, and just cutting it with the razor blade, I could not get it perfect. So if anyone has any techniques for using the razor blade to get an exact perfect cut, let me know, because I am not a fan of doing it this way. It was just exhausting. And then I moved on to hardware, and again, she picked the most beautiful hardware. This hardware did require 4 holes per knob, but this hardware is not going anywhere, so the 4 holes is not a problem. So I very carefully measured out the 4 holes, and then I screwed them all individually. Here's a reminder of what the 2 pieces looked like before, and here they are now. There's her style, the gorgeous magenta, and then there's my style. This was my before again. Remember that very bland look, and here it is after, with that whole flare added to the front. The finish came out phenomenally smooth. I'm so happy with it. And then the drawers as well, the drawer liners, I think were just a beautiful touch for it, for the black on black on black with the nice wood trim afterwards. The legs were incredibly sturdy. I was really happy with how those turned out. And remember again, that old trim that was on it. And here is how the trim looks now. It's really smooth, really well done, and I'm super happy with the result from the edge banding. Here's a reminder of her piece before. It was just very bland, and now it is beautiful. I am so incredibly in love with the pink and the gold contrast, and I just think that she designed this piece so well. She wanted a really bold statement hardware, and I think this just nailed it. They are 5 by 5 inches big, and they are massive, you guys. The finish for the paint came out really sturdy, and I'm super happy with how that turned out. And then I think the subtle gold for the drawer liners was perfect touch. These pieces are nothing like how they looked like before. I think that the designs are so different from each other, but I'm so incredibly happy with both of them separately. I love them. That is all for this week's episode, you guys. I had so much fun doing these 2 transformations back to back. Honestly, projects do go faster when you work on multiple at a time, because then you can do all the steps at the same time. But this one was specifically so much fun. My client has, as you saw, the most bold and most beautiful style. I absolutely love it. And then I got to do a piece that resembles my style a little more, which compared to hers is pretty gothic, so definitely eye-opening. But I really enjoyed doing this whole set, and I really appreciate you guys checking in. If you learned anything, make sure to subscribe for so much more, and definitely stick around for next week's video as well. And maybe one week I will have to clean the garage door, because it's in almost every video and it is yikes. Okay guys, we'll see you next week. Bye!